The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the streets of Riverside into rivers of reflected neon lights. Inside the Copper Kettle restaurant, Maya-chan adjusted her hearing aids for the third time, her fingers trembling slightly as she checked her phone again. 7:45. He was now 30 minutes late. The waiter had passed by twice, offering apologetic smiles and water refills. Maya could feel the eyes of other diners on her, some sympathetic, others curious. She'd worn her favorite emerald dress, the one that brought out the jade undertones in her dark eyes. Her mother had helped her with her makeup, excited that Maya was finally putting herself out there again after the disaster with her ex-boyfriend 2 years ago. "You're beautiful, sweetheart," her mother had signed that afternoon. "Any man would be lucky to have you." But sitting alone in a crowded restaurant, watching couples laugh over shared appetizers, Maya felt anything but lucky. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a fool. Her phone buzzed. Finally. "Sorry, running late. Traffic is crazy. Be there in 10. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. Okay, 10 minutes. She could wait 10 more minutes. She'd already invested this much time getting ready, practicing conversation starters in the mirror, mentally preparing herself for the inevitable moment when she'd have to explain about her hearing loss. She'd been upfront in her dating profile, of course. Profoundly deaf, fluent in ASL and lip reading, was right there in her bio. But she'd learned the hard way that people often didn't read profiles carefully. Or they read them and thought it wouldn't be that bad. Or they convinced themselves they were open-minded until faced with the reality. The door opened, bringing in a gust of wet wind and a man who matched the photos from the dating app. Tall, well-dressed in a gray suit that was now speckled with rain. Marcus Wellington, 32, finance manager, loved hiking and craft beer. They'd been messaging for 2 weeks. Maya's hand instinctively rose in a small wave. Marcus spotted her, and his face did something she'd seen too many times before. A flicker of recognition, followed by a micro-expression of surprise, then something that looked uncomfortably like disappointment. He walked over slowly, shaking rain from his expensive leather briefcase. Maya stood, offering her hand and her most confident smile, the one that had gotten her through nursing school presentations and difficult conversations with doctors who underestimated her. "Maya?" he said, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and wasn't thrilled about it. "Yes, hi. It's great to finally meet you in person." She'd practiced making her voice sound natural, not too loud, not too soft. Her speech therapist would be proud. Marcus took her offered hand limply, held it for barely a second before letting go. He glanced around the restaurant as if looking for an escape route, then reluctantly sat down. "So," he said, not quite meeting her eyes, "you're actually deaf?" The words hit like a slap. Not "how are you?" or "sorry I'm late." Just straight to the thing he clearly saw as a problem. "I am," Maya replied, keeping her voice steady. "I mentioned it in my profile. I have cochlear implants and hearing aids, and I'm excellent at lip reading." "Right, yeah." Marcus picked up the menu, studying it with far more intensity than it deserved. "I guess I thought you meant like partially deaf or something, like maybe just some hearing problems. Not completely deaf." Maya felt her stomach clench. "I have profound hearing loss, but I communicate very effectively. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital. I speak 3 languages." Sure, Marcus said, but his tone was dismissive, like she was overselling herself. "It's just, this is a lot. I mean, how are we even supposed to have a normal conversation? Do I need to shout? Do you need me to face you all the time? This seems really complicated." At a nearby table, a single father was helping his young son cut his steak. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 8, had bright yellow hearing aids that matched his superhero t-shirt. The father moved with practiced ease, making sure the boy could see his face when he spoke, supplementing words with simple signs. Maya found herself watching them, a lifeline in her drowning moment. "You don't need to shout," she said to Marcus, pulling her attention back to the disaster unfolding before her. "Just speak normally and look at me when you talk. That's all I ask." Marcus set down his menu with a heavy sigh. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you because I believe in being upfront. This isn't going to work. I thought maybe we could try, but I can already tell this would be exhausting. My life is stressful enough without having to worry about whether my girlfriend can hear me in restaurants or at parties with my friends. And I travel a lot for work. How would that even work?" "I manage just fine," Maya said, her voice quieter now, the fight draining out of her. "My hearing loss doesn't define my capabilities." "I'm sure you're very capable," Marcus said in the tone people use when they absolutely don't believe what they're saying. "But I need someone who can be a full partner. Someone I don't have to make accommodations for constantly. Someone normal." The word hung in the air like poison gas. Normal. As if Maya had ever had the luxury of being normal. As if she hadn't worked twice as hard as every hearing student in nursing school. As if she hadn't proven herself over and over again to every skeptical professor, every doubtful supervisor, every patient's parent who questioned whether a deaf nurse could properly care for their child. "I think it's best if we just call it a night," Marcus continued, already pulling out his wallet and throwing down a $20 bill. "No hard feelings, okay? You seem nice, but this just isn't for me. Good luck with everything." He stood, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out without looking back. The door closed behind him with a soft chime that Maya felt rather than heard. She sat frozen for a moment, aware of the curious stares, the pitying glances. Tears threatened, hot and shameful behind her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people. But then she heard a chair scrape, and someone was standing in front of her table. Not Marcus returning to apologize. Someone else entirely. The single father from the nearby table. Daniel Rodriguez wasn't the type of man to involve himself in other people's business. At 35, after 10 years as a high school teacher and 3 years as a single father, he'd learned to pick his battles carefully. But watching that pompous man berate the woman in the green dress, watching her spine straighten with dignity even as humiliation colored her cheeks, something in him couldn't stay silent. He'd caught fragments of the conversation, enough to understand what was happening, enough to feel his blood boil. His son, Mateo, tugged on his sleeve. "Papa," he signed, his small hands moving with the fluency they'd worked so hard to develop. "Why is that man being mean to the pretty lady?" Daniel had no good answer for that. How do you explain cruelty to an 8-year-old? How do you tell your son that some people see disability before they see humanity? "Some people don't understand, Mijo," Daniel signed back. "But we do, don't we?" Mateo nodded solemnly, his yellow hearing aids catching the restaurant lights. He'd picked yellow specifically because he wanted them to match his favorite superhero. "Superheroes are brave and different," he'd told Daniel when they were choosing. "Like me." When Marcus walked out, Daniel saw the woman's shoulders sag, saw her blink rapidly, fighting tears, and he made a decision. "Stay here, buddy," he signed to Mateo. "I'll be right back." He approached her table and she looked up, startled. Her eyes were dark and deep, filled with barely contained emotion. She was beautiful in a way that made him briefly forget why he'd walked over. "I'm sorry," he said clearly, making sure she could see his face. "I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing some of that conversation. And I just wanted to say that guy is an absolute idiot." Maya blinked, surprise replacing the hurt in her expression. Thank you. I mean it," Daniel continued. He gestured to Mateo, who was watching curiously from their table. "That's my son, Mateo. He's deaf, has been since birth. And I can tell you with complete certainty that your deafness doesn't make you any less worthy of respect, love, or a decent dinner companion. A small laugh escaped Maya's lips, surprising them both. That's really kind of you to say. It's not kindness. It's facts. Daniel found himself signing as he spoke, a habit he'd developed since Mateo's diagnosis. I'm Daniel, by the way, and before you worry that I'm some creep trying to pick you up while you're vulnerable, I'm not. I just saw someone being treated badly and wanted to remind them that they deserve better. Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but these seemed different, softer. I'm Maya, and I really needed to hear that right now. Would you like to join us? The words were out of Daniel's mouth before he'd fully thought them through. Our food just arrived, we have plenty, and honestly, Mateo would love to meet someone else who signs. We don't get to do that often. Maya hesitated, glancing at the waiter who was approaching with a question in his eyes. She looked at Daniel, then at Mateo, who was now waving enthusiastically, his small hands moving in the sign for hello. Are you sure? She asked. I don't want to impose on your father-son time. You wouldn't be imposing. You'd be rescuing me from having to listen to Mateo explain his Minecraft world for the 17th time this week. That got a real laugh. Well, when you put it that way. 5 minutes later, Maya was settled at their table, and Mateo was staring at her with the unfiltered fascination only children possess. Your dress is really pretty, he signed. Like an emerald. That's my birthstone. Papa taught me all the birthstones. Thank you, Maya signed back, her movements fluid and natural. Your hearing aids are amazing. I love that they're yellow. Mateo beamed. Like a superhero. Papa says I'm brave like a superhero. Your papa is absolutely right. Daniel watched them interact, something warm unfurling in his chest. Mateo had always been shy around new people, especially since starting at a mainstream school where he was the only deaf student. But with Maya, he was animated, excited, his usual guardedness completely absent. So, Daniel said, making sure both Maya and Mateo could see him speak. What do you do, Maya? Besides grace the world with your presence and deal with jerks who don't deserve your time. Maya smiled. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial. I work mostly in the ICU. That's incredible, Daniel said, genuinely impressed. That must be challenging work. It is, Maya agreed. But it's also rewarding. A lot of my young patients are scared. Being in a hospital is frightening when you're a kid. But when I show them my hearing aids, when I teach them a few signs, they realize that I'm different too. And suddenly, they're not so scared anymore. You're like a superhero, Mateo signed enthusiastically. Like me. Exactly like you, Maya confirmed. Their dinner continued, conversation flowing with surprising ease. Daniel learned that Maya had lost most of her hearing at age 6 due to meningitis. That she'd learned sign language and speech simultaneously, determined to navigate both the deaf and hearing worlds. That she'd fought her way through nursing school despite professors who questioned whether she could safely care for patients. Maya learned that Daniel taught American history at Washington High School. That his wife, Mateo's mother, had left when Mateo was 2, unable to cope with raising a deaf child. That Daniel had learned ASL through intensive courses, YouTube videos at 3 in the morning, and sheer determination to communicate with his son. The hardest part, Daniel admitted, wasn't learning the signs. It was learning to see Mateo's deafness as a difference, not a deficit. Society is so quick to label things as disabilities, as problems to fix. But Mateo isn't broken. He's just Mateo. I wish more people understood that, Maya said softly. My ex-boyfriend used to introduce me as my girlfriend. She's deaf, but she's really smart. As if my intelligence was surprising given my disability. Please tell me he's your ex for that reason. Among others. Maya took a sip of water. He also hated that I signed in public. Said it drew too much attention. He wanted me to just use my hearing aids and blend in. Daniel's jaw clenched. What an absolute! He glanced at Mateo and modified his language. What an absolute disappointment of a human being. Papa almost said a bad word. Mateo signed gleefully. Papa is very sorry. Daniel signed back with exaggerated solemnity. The evening stretched on, dessert ordered and shared between all three of them. Mateo taught Maya the signs for different dinosaurs, his current obsession. Maya taught them both some medical signs, useful terminology that Daniel had never thought to learn. As the restaurant began to empty, Daniel realized he hadn't enjoyed an evening this much in years. There was something about Maya's presence that felt right, natural, like a puzzle piece that fit perfectly even though he hadn't known there was a space to fill. I should probably get Mateo home, Daniel said reluctantly, checking his watch. It's past his bedtime, and tomorrow is a school day. Of course, Maya said, but he could hear the disappointment in her voice. But, Daniel continued, pulling out his phone, we have a tradition. Every Sunday morning, Mateo and I go to this amazing breakfast place called Rosie's Diner. Best pancakes in the city. Would you like to join us this weekend? Maya's face lit up. I would love that. They exchanged numbers, and as they prepared to leave, Mateo gave Maya an unexpected hug. Thank you for having dinner with us, he signed. You make Papa smile the way he used to smile at pictures of Mama. Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't realized Mateo had noticed. Hadn't thought his son was aware of how long it had been since Daniel had truly relaxed, truly enjoyed someone's company. Thank you for saving my evening. Maya signed back to Mateo, then looked at Daniel. Both of you. In the parking lot, as they walked to their separate cars, Daniel called out, Maya. She turned back. That guy tonight? Marcus? He's going to regret this for the rest of his life. I hope you know that. I don't know about that, Maya replied, but she was smiling. I do, Daniel said firmly, because anyone who can't see how extraordinary you are doesn't deserve to have seen you at all. Rosie's Diner had been a Riverside institution for 40 years, a chrome and vinyl throwback to classic American diners with the best pancakes west of the Mississippi. Daniel and Mateo had been coming here every Sunday for the past 2 years, occupying the same corner booth where the light was good and Mateo could see everyone who entered. This Sunday, though, Daniel was nervous. He changed his shirt 3 times that morning, earning a confused look from Mateo. Papa, why are you being weird? His son had signed. I'm not being weird. You're being weird. Is it because of Maya? 8-year-olds were terrifyingly perceptive. They arrived at 9:30, their usual time, and Daniel found himself checking the door every 30 seconds. What if she'd changed her mind? What if Thursday night had been a momentary kindness and she'd realized she wasn't interested in spending more time with him? Then the door opened, and Maya walked in. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked more relaxed than she had on Thursday, more herself. When she spotted them, her entire face brightened. Hi! She signed enthusiastically to Mateo, who bounced in his seat with excitement. You came. Papa said you would. But I was worried maybe you forgot, or maybe you had to work, or maybe you decided we were too boring. Mateo, Daniel signed with gentle reproach. Breathe. Maya slid into the booth across from them, laughing. I could never forget. I've been looking forward to this all week. And boring? Impossible. I expect to hear all about these famous pancakes. They're the best, Mateo signed solemnly. We always get the chocolate chip ones. Papa gets blueberry because he's old and thinks fruit makes things healthy. I'm 35, not ancient, Daniel protested. Sounds pretty old to me, Maya teased, her eyes sparkling. They ordered breakfast, and the conversation picked up where it had left off on Thursday, flowing naturally between spoken words and signs. Maya asked Mateo about school, and he told her about his classmates who were learning basic signs to communicate with him. There's this girl, Emma, Mateo signed, his hands moving shyly. She learned to sign "You're my friend," all by herself. She looked it up on YouTube. That's wonderful, Maya signed. You must feel very special. I do, Mateo admitted. Sometimes kids stare at my hearing aids, but Emma said they're cool. She wants yellow ones too, but she doesn't need them because her ears work normal. Daniel watched Maya's expression carefully, knowing that word, normal, could be loaded, but she handled it gracefully. You know what I tell kids when they ask about my hearing aids? Maya signed. I tell them normal is boring. I tell them we're the interesting ones. Mateo considered this seriously. You're right. Normal is boring. Their food arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Then Maya asked Daniel, how did you end up teaching history? Was that always the plan? Actually, no, Daniel admitted. I was pre-law in college. Thought I'd be a lawyer like my father. But during undergrad, I volunteered as a tutor for at-risk kids, and I discovered I love teaching. Watching a student finally understand something they'd been struggling with, there's nothing like that feeling. I know exactly what you mean, Maya said. That's how I feel when I help a scared kid calm down before a procedure. When I can make them smile, even for a moment, when they're in pain or frightened. That's why I became a nurse. How did your family react when you chose nursing? Daniel asked. Given your hearing loss, I imagine some people had concerns. Maya's expression clouded slightly. My parents were supportive, but everyone else had opinions. Extended family, family friends, even my academic advisor initially. They kept suggesting I consider other careers. Something more suitable. Data entry, accounting, jobs where I wouldn't need to communicate as much. But nursing requires constant communication, Daniel said. Exactly. That's why I chose it. I wanted to prove that deaf people can do anything hearing people can do. We just do it differently. She paused. Although I'll admit there have been challenges. I had one professor who tried to fail me on clinical rotations. He said I'd missed verbal cues from patients. When I proved I hadn't, that I'd actually caught things other students missed by watching body language more carefully, he had to pass me. But he never stopped believing I didn't belong in nursing. What a small-minded man, Daniel said, anger flaring on her behalf. He was, Maya agreed. But you know what? Every time someone doubts me, it makes me more determined. I'm not just succeeding for me anymore. I'm succeeding for every deaf kid who's been told they can't be a nurse, or a teacher, or whatever they dream of being. Mateo had been following their conversation intently. Now he signed. Is that why you're a superhero? Because you don't give up? Maya's eyes softened. I think you and I are superheroes for the same reason, Mateo. We keep going even when things are hard. After breakfast, as they walked through the parking lot, Mateo ran ahead slightly, giving Daniel a moment alone with Maya. Thank you for this, Maya said. For Thursday, for today. I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time. The feeling is mutual, Daniel replied. Mateo hasn't connected with someone this quickly since ever. They stood by Maya's car, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Why did you really come over to my table on Thursday? You could have just felt bad from a distance like everyone else. Daniel thought about this. Because Mateo was watching. He's at an age where he's starting to notice how differently people treat him because of his hearing aids. And I wanted him to see that when someone is being treated unfairly, you don't just feel bad. You stand up. You say something, even if it's uncomfortable. You're a good father, Maya said softly. I'm trying to be. Daniel hesitated, then added, would you want to do this again? Maybe next week? Or during the week if you have time? I'd love to, Maya said immediately. Actually, I have Wednesday off. There's an art exhibit at the Riverside Museum about deaf artists throughout history. Would you and Mateo be interested? That sounds perfect. They made plans, exchanged more smiles, and finally parted ways. As Daniel drove home with Mateo chattering excitedly in the back seat, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Wednesday arrived gray and chilly, autumn asserting itself with falling leaves and the promise of early winter. Daniel had arranged for a substitute teacher for his afternoon classes, something he rarely did, but this felt important. The Riverside Museum's exhibit, Silent Voices, Deaf Artists Who Changed the World, was more impressive than Daniel had anticipated. Paintings, sculptures, photographs, all created by deaf artists, their work speaking volumes in the language of visual beauty. Mateo was fascinated by everything, especially a series of paintings by a deaf artist who'd used vibrant colors to represent the sounds he couldn't hear. The artist had included descriptions of each painting's sound in sign language videos that played on small screens beside each piece. "This is amazing," Mateo signed, his face pressed close to a painting of what the artist called the sound of laughter. It was all gold and yellow swirls, warm and bright. Maya stood beside him, reading the artist's statement aloud for both of them. He says, "People always ask me how I can paint sound when I can't hear it. But I don't paint what I hear. I paint what I feel. Laughter feels like sunshine. Anger feels like sharp red lines. Love feels like soft blue waves." "That makes sense to me," Mateo signed seriously. "I can feel music even though I can't hear it good. It vibrates." They spent 2 hours in the museum, Maya and Mateo bonding over their shared understanding of the world, Daniel learning new perspectives he'd never considered. As a hearing person, he'd always taken sound for granted. Now, seeing the world through their eyes, he realized how much he'd been missing. After the museum, they grabbed hot chocolate at a nearby cafe. Mateo, exhausted from all the excitement, colored quietly in an activity book while Daniel and Maya talked. "Can I ask you something personal?" Daniel said. "Of course. Do you ever wish you could hear?" "I know that's probably an inappropriate question, but I've always wondered, and I don't want to ask Mateo because I don't want him to think there's something wrong with him." Maya considered this carefully. "That's a complicated question. Sometimes, yes, I'd like to hear music the way hearing people describe it. I'd like to hear my mother's laugh, hear the rain, hear birds singing. But those are things I've never experienced, so I don't know what I'm missing." "Not really. That makes sense. But here's what I want you to understand, Daniel. And I want you to tell Mateo this when he's old enough to ask that same question." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "I'm not a hearing person who lost something. I'm not broken or incomplete. I'm a deaf person, and that's its own complete identity. My deafness has shaped who I am, how I see the world, how I connect with people. If I woke up tomorrow able to hear, I'd be fundamentally different. And I like who I am." "That's beautiful," Daniel said quietly. "And important. Thank you for sharing that. There's actually a term for it in the deaf community," Maya continued. "We talk about capital D deaf versus lowercase d deaf. Lowercase deaf is just the medical condition. Capital D deaf is the cultural identity. Some people are deaf and wish they could hear. Others are deaf and embrace it as part of who they are. Neither is wrong. It's personal. Where do you fall?" "I'm somewhere in the middle," Maya admitted. "I move between both worlds, the hearing world and the deaf world. I'm comfortable in both, which is a privilege many people don't have. But it also means I don't fully belong to either sometimes. The hearing world sees me as deaf. The deaf world sometimes sees me as not deaf enough because I can speak and lip read. It's complicated." "What about Mateo?" Daniel asked, glancing at his son. "How do I help him navigate that?" "Let him decide for himself," Maya said. "Expose him to both worlds. Let him meet other deaf kids and adults. But also teach him to be confident in hearing spaces. The most important thing is making sure he knows his deafness doesn't limit his future. He can be anything he wants to be." Their conversation continued, ranging from the practical to the philosophical. Maya shared resources for deaf education, told him about summer camps for deaf children, explained the importance of deaf role models. Daniel listened, asked questions, absorbed everything like the teacher he was. As the afternoon wore on and Mateo started to fade, they decided to call it a day. In the parking lot, as they prepared to go their separate ways, Mateo surprised them both. "Maya," he signed, his small face serious. "Will you be my grown-up friend? Papa has teacher friends and neighbor friends, but I want a friend who signs good like me. Is that okay?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down to Mateo's level. "I would be honored to be your friend, Mateo. Absolutely honored." "Good," Mateo signed, satisfied. Then, with the brutal honesty of children, he added, "Also, I think Papa likes you. He smiles different when you're here." "Mateo," Daniel signed, mortified. But Maya just laughed, stood up, and said to Daniel, "Kids are perceptive, aren't they?" "Terrifyingly so." Daniel agreed, his face warm with embarrassment. After they'd said goodbye and Daniel was buckling Mateo into his car seat, his son signed, "Did I do something wrong? You look embarrassed." "No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. You said something true that maybe I wasn't ready to say yet. But it is true, right? You do like her." Daniel met his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, Mijo. I do like her. Is that okay with you?" Mateo thought about this seriously. "Will she be around a lot if you like her?" "Maybe. If she wants to be." "Good." Mateo signed decidedly. "I like her too. And she makes you happy. You should be happy, Papa. You take care of me all the time. Someone should take care of you too." Daniel's throat tightened. Sometimes his son was so wise it scared him. That night, after Mateo was in bed, Daniel texted Maya, "Thank you for today. Mateo hasn't stopped talking about the museum." "Neither have I, honestly." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for including me. I had a wonderful time." Daniel typed, deleted, retyped, then finally sent, "Mateo isn't the only one who thinks you're pretty amazing. Just so you know." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I think you're pretty amazing too, Daniel. And I really like spending time with both of you." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even technically a first date. But it felt like the beginning of something real. 3 weeks into their growing friendship, reality reminded them that the world wasn't always as kind as their small circle had become. Daniel and Maya had fallen into an easy routine. Wednesday dinners after she got off work. Sunday breakfasts at Rosie's. Quick coffee dates when their schedules aligned. Mateo was always included, and he'd taken to calling Maya his special friend in sign language. But that Tuesday, Daniel got a call from Mateo's school. "Mr. Rodriguez," Principal Stevens said, her voice carrying that careful tone administrators use when delivering bad news. "I need you to come pick up Mateo. There's been an incident." Daniel's heart lurched. "Is he hurt? What happened?" "He's not physically hurt, but he's very upset. There was an altercation with another student. I think it's best if we discuss this in person." 20 minutes later, Daniel was sitting in the principal's office, Mateo beside him, his son's eyes red-rimmed from crying. Across from them sat Mrs. Peterson and her son, Travis, who was in Mateo's class. "Let me explain what happened," Principal Stevens began. During recess, Travis made some comments about Mateo's hearing aids. When Mateo asked him to stop Travis, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Travis called Mateo some unkind names. Mateo pushed Travis, Travis pushed back, and a teacher intervened. "What names?" Daniel asked, his jaw tight. Mrs. Peterson interrupted. "Boys will be boys, Mr. Rodriguez. They roughhouse. It's not a big deal. With respect, Mrs. Peterson, I'd like to know what your son said to mine." Travis had been staring at his shoes. Now he mumbled something inaudible. "Travis," Principal Stevens said firmly, "please repeat what you said to Mateo during recess." "I said his hearing aids were stupid," Travis said, still not making eye contact. "And that he talks weird because he's deaf and dumb." "Deaf and dumb." The slur hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Travis, Mrs. Peterson gasped, but Daniel noticed she looked more embarrassed than angry. Daniel felt Mateo trembling beside him. He put his arm around his son, pulling him close and signed, "It's okay, Mijo. You did nothing wrong." "Now, Mr. Rodriguez," Principal Stevens continued, "I understand your son was upset, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for physical violence. Both boys will need to serve detention." "My son was being bullied," Daniel said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He was called a slur, and you want to punish him for defending himself." "School policy. School policy should protect children with disabilities from harassment," Daniel interrupted. "Has Travis been educated about disability sensitivity? Do you have anti-bullying protocols specifically for students with special needs?" Principal Stevens shifted uncomfortably. "We treat all bullying seriously. That's not what I asked." The meeting deteriorated from there. Mrs. Peterson insisted Travis had just been joking around. Principal Stevens stood by her decision that both boys needed consequences. Daniel stood his ground that his son was the victim, not a perpetrator. Finally, Daniel said, "Fine. Mateo will serve his detention. But I want a formal complaint filed about disability harassment, and I want to know what steps the school is taking to prevent this from happening again." He signed to Mateo, "Let's go home." In the car, Mateo was quiet for a long time. Finally, he signed, "Am I dumb, Papa?" "No," Daniel signed emphatically. "You are brilliant and kind and amazing. Travis was wrong. People sometimes say cruel things when they don't understand something. That doesn't make those things true. But I do talk different than other kids. You talk perfectly. You speak 2 languages, English and ASL. Most kids your age only speak 1. That makes you special, not dumb. Kids at school think I'm weird." "Some kids do," Daniel admitted, "because lying would help nothing. But Emma doesn't. And Marcus and Sophie and Claire. They think you're great. The people who matter see you for who you are." Mateo was quiet again, processing. Then he signed, "Can we call Maya? I want to talk to her." 20 minutes later, they were at Maya's apartment. She'd rushed home from work when Daniel called, still in her scrubs, her face stormy when she heard what had happened. "Come here, sweetheart," she signed to Mateo, and he went to her immediately, curling into her side on the couch. "You want to know a secret?" Maya signed. "When I was your age, kids made fun of me too. They called me names. They mimicked the way I talked. One boy used to put his fingers in his ears and make funny faces at me." Mateo looked up at her. "What did you do?" "At first, I cried. A lot. I told my mom I didn't want to go to school anymore. But then my grandmother, who was also deaf, told me something I've never forgotten." Maya paused, making sure both Mateo and Daniel could see her hands. She said, "Small people try to make others smaller."